You want to go ahead and pull up your slides?
Absolutely.
While that's loading, I'll just start really quick. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our first session, to our first webinar, um, or workshop of the Virtual Pharmacy School Fair. My name is Gabriella. I'm from AACP, and I'll be moderating this session. We're going to get started with today's session in a moment, putting yourself on paper, navigating the PharmCAS Personal Essay. But first, a few housekeeping items. Although you will be muted the entirety of the webinar, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A window throughout the webinar, and we'll try to save some time at the end to address those questions. If there are any questions that we can't get to, our speakers should be available in their booths during the expo hours, which are 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So we highly encourage you to visit their booth at that time. And also, the presentation will be recorded and available immediately afterward in the Sessions tab. So now I'm going to turn it over to our speaker to get started.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for choosing to be with me and being here today. AACP does a great job with this event, so we're super excited to have you. My name is Tyler Bingham. I am the Assistant Director for Recruiting and Advising for the UB School of Pharmacy, but I also wear another hat as an English professor, so I love to sort of talk with students and work with them as it relates to their personal statements and help them get in a good place where they're comfortable with writing a personal essay. I think there are some unique challenges to the PharmCAS personal essay, so we're going to work through some of those today. As was mentioned, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A feature, and I'm happy to address anything that comes up. Here's a little bit of a taste of some of the things that we'll dive into. We'll start by overviewing the PharmCAS personal essay requirements. We'll then dive into some common issues that I see come up with personal essays when they're submitted. We'll then talk about maybe a more like STEM-centric approach to thinking about talking about yourself in an essay format. I'll overview quickly a brainstorming tool that I use as a wrap, and then we'll summarize the things we talked about and dive into that Q&A. So I like to start by really just first looking at what it is that the personal essay asks of us. And if you haven't seen it yet, the prompt for the personal essay for PharmCAS is as follows. In this section, write a personal essay that addresses why you selected pharmacy as a career and how the Doctor of Pharmacy degree relates to your immediate and long-term professional goals. Describe how your personal, educational, and professional background will help you achieve these goals. They then list out the following requirements. Keep your essay topic general. You don't want to focus on any one specific school because every school does get the same personal essay. They ask you not to exceed their maximum length of 4,500 characters, to use your own words, and to use a simple text editor. So instead of using like a Word or a Google Doc, you might use a Notepad document or an Apple Notes app to craft your personal essay. But where do I see students struggle with this process? Really, the thing that I see in terms of the difficulty, especially for some students when it comes to writing personal essays, is that you're maybe not as used to some of your peers as at crafting expository writing about yourself, having to write about yourself in a context that feels maybe vaguely creative, but then also feels like it has a certain requirement or threshold that you have to hit in terms of explaining what it is that you're trying to do with your degree. Like unlike a lab report or other essays that you might have done, it can really be hard to know like what's the boundary of oversharing, what is the right thing to share. So I like to really sort of reframe the conversation surrounding the personal essay into one that I hope is really more STEM focused and help students maybe like yourself like really navigate this process effectively. A couple of common issues that I see, and I would say the number one thing that I see is treating as personal statement like a CV or resume. So taking all the time in the experiences section of PharmCast to detail everything that it is that you've done, and then kind of dumping all of that in 1 to 2 sentence increments into a personal statement make it really hard to read and create some difficulties. Oversharing is also a really common thing. Understandably, many students have a personal sort of story or journey into healthcare and pharmacy specifically, but there can be some boundaries that we want to be aware of and not cross when it comes to sharing personal information. No clear sort of direction in terms of why pharmacy education is the next step for you, and then an overall sort of lack of confidence. And that's sort of where we'll end. So I won't touch too deeply on that just yet. Biggest thing I want to do is make this as easy as possible for everyone involved. And for me, the biggest thing that I can sort of compare a personal essay to is any kind of broad argumentative writing. In fact, a personal statement is argumentative writing. You're seeking to persuade a school of pharmacy or a university to admit you as a student into the PharmD program. Because of that, I think a really great way to format this paper is kind of treating it like a thesis. Even though that might sound a little weird because you're not going to do any research and it's focused on you, really developing and supporting a thesis statement is a really effective way to establish a sort of direction for your paper that makes it really easy to clearly communicate the things that you want to highlight in your application. So let's take another look at that prompt. The way that it's really structured is in what we call an imperative tone or like a command, right? Someone's telling you to do something. In this section, write a personal essay that addresses these goals. Describe, right? It's not really a question. And I think normally when students are being prompted for this kind of writing, they're usually expecting a question, right? A question that a thesis statement might answer. So I think the easiest thing to do is sort of reshape this personal essay prompt into a series of questions. Why did you select pharmacy as a career, and how does the PharmD relate to your immediate and long-term goals? When you answer this question, be sure to draw on personal, educational, and professional experiences that will help you achieve your goals. I think just reading it from a question perspective makes this a lot less, I would say, burdensome in terms of a process because it's really clear. Like the question we're answering here is why do I want to go to pharmacy school, right? The question that hopefully all of you have been thinking about for months and months and months at this point and talking about with maybe advisors at the undergraduate level or with supervising pharmacists in a tech position. So really, like we want to take this and use it to our advantage. So we know why we want to go to pharmacy school. That's the thing that we're going to write about here. And what's really helpful in terms of framing this conversation is the PharmCAS personal statement definition is giving us three categories of information that we're directed to pull from. We can pull from personal experience, educational experience, and professional experience, right? If we think of this from a thesis format, these are your sort of like research areas that you're going to pull from your own life, right? So instead of having like research that you'll do through your library, you're going to really think about yourself introspectively in these three categories and use that as the basis of supporting your argument that you deserve to go to pharmacy school. So the thing that I really like to do is use a mock student for directing this conversation, right? So now that we have a sense of what it is that we're going to do in terms of formulating maybe an easier approach to answering this sort of proposition that the PharmCAS personal statement gives us, I want to frame it in terms of a student that I've created. This is not a real student that I've ever worked with, but I've created her. Her name is Sophie, and she's interested in going to pharmacy school. Now, what we want to do is take that question, why did you select pharmacy as a career and how does the PharmD relate to your goals, and direct it into an argumentative response, right? Into a thesis statement. So one example might be this, which is what I've drafted up. I selected pharmacy as a career because of my strong interest in clinical practice and being a key member of a healthcare team. Earning a PharmD is a necessary first step for achieving this long-term goal. And pharmacy school will give me the requisite knowledge to pursue a residency, another step in the clinical pharmacy journey. My strong academic experiences, leadership on my soccer team, and shadowing experience in a pharmacy will all support me in pursuit of the pharmacy profession and the PharmD degree. What I like about this response, right, from an evaluation perspective, is the student has done a couple of things here, right? They've clearly outlined at a basic level what their overall goal with pharmacy education is, right? They want to be a clinical pharmacist, pursue a residency. They've also made it really clear that they understand sort of the direction that they have to go with their education, right? They're going to have to go to pharmacy school first, earn that PharmD, establish themselves a little bit before they pursue residency. And they've given us a hint at some of the different things that they want to talk about within the essay, right? So they've already hinted that they have some strong academic experiences that they might want to highlight, that they're on their soccer team, and that they have shadowing experience, right? So these are three distinct categories. Those are going to match those three categories that we have over here in personal, educational, and professional, and really support the PharmCAS personal statement that they're writing overall. Now, we have a thesis statement. How do we actually put this together? For me, the 5 paragraph essay format is like your golden ticket to making this as easy as possible for yourself. Guaranteed you've written a million of these, whether they're in the form of a lab report or a high school essay that you wrote, or an essay that you wrote maybe in one of your basic English classes that you've taken through your general education curriculum. At some point, you have written an argumentative 5 paragraph essay. And our goal is to really harness that and use that as the format here. So we have a thesis that we've already talked about. And what's cool about a personal statement is really that like the introduction really doesn't need to be much more complicated than that, right? So your thesis statement can kind of serve as your introduction here, but here's a great portion if you want to add in a little bit of personal detail about yourself. Maybe again, you've had a relative that like has a really close experience with healthcare that you've been able to observe. This is a great place to highlight that and sort of in a controlled environment. But your thesis statement is probably going to be plenty. We then have to follow through and have some body paragraphs if we're doing a 5 paragraph essay. What's really nice is our thesis has kind of given us a roadmap with which to do that, right? So when people are reading an essay, they're typically expecting what we call a logical flow. So this is that last portion. My strong academic experiences, leadership on my soccer team, and shadowing experience in a pharmacy will all support me in pursuit of the pharmacy profession and the PharmD degree. If someone was submitting this essay and I was reviewing it, I would expect them to talk about their academic experiences, leadership on the soccer team, and shadowing experience in a pharmacy in their essay and in that order. So what's really nice is by having 3 clear examples, we now have 3 clear paragraphs that we can craft. We can use body paragraph 1 to focus on those strong academic experiences. We can use body paragraph 2 to talk about our leadership experience and our soccer team experience. And we can use body paragraph 3 to talk about our professional sort of opportunities and the opportunity to shadow within a pharmacy setting. A conclusion, just like your traditional 5 paragraph essay, is just going to restate your introduction. So it really creates itself as like this like natural process, I think, for students, rather than trying to log jam through this like biography of your life and not really having any semblance of order, because that's really the number one issue, right? If I boil down all of those things that I talked about at the beginning in terms of common pitfalls that I see with essay writing, the number one thing that I see is that students just don't have a structure. They either intend only to allude to like a personal family story when it comes to medication, and they accidentally make their whole personal statement about that, or they have all these different ideas and they don't really know how to fit them together. The 5 paragraph essay format kind of locks you into a direction that you can expect that you have to hit in order to craft your essay overall. And I find that it works really, really well within that 4,500 character limit that PharmCAS offers you. 4,500 characters is a pretty tight limit. So having something that's nice and organized will also take pressure off of you in terms of like deleting sentences later on, because you're not going to over explain different things. You're going to be really, really direct throughout the process. Now, it might seem like we're kind of already shaping the essay, but now we're going to brainstorming. And that's really just in this context to help make it easier for you to sort of perceive how it is that we're going to craft the essay. So we're actually going to kind of step back now from where it expects you to begin. The next couple of slides will have a brainstorming tool that I developed. You do not have to use this. You can use a million different ones, but I think that this one, based on feedback that I get from students, is pretty helpful, and it can help you organize that creative writing piece of it. So we really want to cover 3 main areas when we are writing any kind of essay, right? We want to meet whatever that essay prompt is going to be. But we also want to make sure that we communicate what we want our reader to know about us. And we want to make sure that we have real reasons why our reader should care about the things that we're telling them, right? And I think this is often the thing that helps students the most frame in terms of what experiences they want to share. Because if you have, for example, like a history of being on the dean's list throughout your entire education, that's awesome. And it's definitely worth sharing that. But you want to think about when you share it. Why would someone like me who doesn't know you and is going to maybe read like 100 of these personal statements, why should I care? Right? What work did you have to put in? How does it matter to you? Why does it matter to you? So I think that these 2 questions, the what you want your reader to know about you question and the why should your reader care question, really help drive sort of how you're going to explain your experiences within those body paragraphs. But I've had Sophie fill it out for us. And you can see that up at the top, we have what our student here wants the reader to know about them. So they want to know that they've participated in the soccer team, that their strong academic experience actually led to TA experience, and that they have shadowing experience within a pharmacy setting. Now, why should the reader care about this? Well, in the case of soccer and being a TA, they have strong leadership experience, right? Those of you that maybe were varsity athletes or even club sport athletes, you know what it's like to have to manage your athletic schedule with an academic schedule, especially with hard sciences courses. The TA experience is going to put you in a position where you have a really, really strong academic backbone, right? You had to do really, really well in a class in order to qualify for that opportunity. The thing that also is really, really great is that the shadowing experience shows a clear interest in pharmacy, right? It makes it clear to the people reading your essay that you didn't just wake up yesterday and decided you wanted to be a pharmacist, but you've taken some time to investigate the field and have come to identify it as the right choice for you. With that, I want to go back here actually for just a second and talk about some of the things that you see here. So, the biggest thing that I often tell students with this, right, is it may not all fit super perfectly, right? You maybe have an experience that doesn't relate to anything you've done at the college level. Maybe it was a volunteer opportunity, or maybe it was something that happened in passing that you really want to share. That is totally okay, right? Um, the biggest thing to think about with a personal essay is that it's your introduction to a university, right? So anything that you value as important is worthy of going in this diagram. But you want to make sure that if you are going to contribute it, that you have a clear reason why it should be contributed, right? So if we go back and we look at this, right? So in the case of Sophie, her body paragraph one is going to focus on her academic experiences. It's going to focus on those TA opportunities. It's not as simple as having a sentence in there and saying, I was a TA. But because she's thought about how a TA position is evocative of her academic achievement, and maybe she can talk a little bit about the kind of work that, let's say, she had to put into a bio class in order to qualify as a TA, she has a really strong backbone with which to support herself in arguing with a pharmacy school in an essay format that she's a really, really talented and gifted academic and will likely do very, very well in a PharmD curriculum, which is understandably challenging. I think what's also great about something like that I don't have listed on the brainstorming tool is that it also shows time management skills for her, right? Which are really, really important when you're managing study and internships and pharmacy school and life outside of the classroom. So it really, really helps to have that kind of framing for her with her soccer experience, right? Like that's clear leadership experience, but it's not as simple as saying like, oh, I was captain or I was co-captain or I was on the team, but like talking a little bit more about, how you develop yourself as a leader. Maybe for your first 2 years of undergrad, you weren't really the person who spoke up on the team bus going to games, or you weren't really the person who, took charge in terms of like organizing like team dinners and things like that. But as you matured, you've had the opportunity to really focus on those skills and nurture those skills and bring folks together. All of that stuff is wonderful stuff because, again, in the case of the pharmacy profession here, right, something that we're really, really keying into is your ability to serve as a member of a healthcare team who's not just servicing other healthcare professionals, but of course, patients, right? So your ability to take on a leadership role, whether that's in a hospital setting, retail setting, is something that folks are looking for. And then the last experience, the shadowing experience, is probably the most self-explanatory, but you have a wonderful opportunity to explain what it was like to step into a pharmacy for the first time, what you learned from that experience, who you talked to, and how that motivated you maybe even further to pursue pharmacy school, right? So the cool thing about this format is it just gives you that really, really simple direction to bring things that you care about into a format in which I can learn about those experiences and be equally proud of you and want to offer you admission to our pharmacy school. And I think when it works really, really well, what I hear from our faculty is that the students that I work with often have some of the strongest personal statements out of all the statements that'll be submitted that academic year. So we really want students to put themselves in a good position to be able to highlight who they are because you all are amazing people. And that really takes me over to the summary side. And this is where I want to talk about confidence a little bit. An important aspect here that I haven't touched on is that a personal statement is all about being confident, right? It's really, really hard when many of us deal with things like imposter syndrome or are just used to saying, like, I think I'm going to do this or I hope to do this to be confident, right? Right now, you're sitting there and maybe you want to be a clinical pharmacist. That is awesome. That does take a lot of work, which I'm sure a lot of people have told you. In a personal essay format, it is so important that you believe that you can do it. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then the person on the other end is not going to believe in you either, right? So when you're writing a personal statement, if you want to highlight something like a goal to work in clinical pharmacy, you want to make sure that you don't say, I think I'm going to do this, but I know I'm going to do this, or I believe in myself and that I'm going to do this. When you're highlighting academic achievements, right? There's like always, of course, a fine line between just like bragging, but also you want to make sure that you're really clear that like not only did you do really, really well in bio, but you worked really hard at it too. And you know that you're going to have to work really hard in pharmacy school, and you believe that you are prepared for that, right? Folks want to make sure at a very basic level that you also understand that you are the driver here, right? At the end of the day, you're the one who has to show up for classes. You're the one who has to study. You're the one who has to make pharmacy school happen for you. So we want to make sure that you come in even at the application stage, really clearly confident in who you're going to be. We also, again, want to make a really, really clear statement as to why we are pursuing this profession, right? There are a lot of options in healthcare, and there are a lot of options in employment just overall. So why pharmacy, right? Out of anything you could have picked, why pharmacy? And why are you excited about it, right? Because you should be excited about it. We want you to be excited about it. Then back that statement up with concrete examples from across your academic and personal lives. Now, Sophie, the student that I've crafted here, has like really, really clear cut, easy ones for me to highlight because I'm doing it from a demonstration perspective. But all of you probably have wonderful things you've done in your life that maybe you don't even think of as that special, that are absolutely unique to you, right? Maybe you're in the student radio, or you've participated in, a Model UN or something like that. Just because it's not directly related to healthcare, just like being on the soccer team is not directly related to healthcare, doesn't mean you didn't learn valuable skills that absolutely translate to a professional career within pharmacy, right? I worked with a student just recently, actually, who we did this whole process with. I helped her with her personal statement. And she said, I don't really have any great professional experiences, but I did work at TJ Maxx. And I said, okay, that's great. What did you learn at TJ Maxx? And then she started talking to me about like how she started out working in the back, and then eventually over time, because they learned to trust her and could see the work that she could do, she was actually like running cash. And I was like, okay, that's great, right? That is a great example of a student who maybe doesn't have like an obvious pharmacy pathway in their work experience or something like that, though, that has valuable skills and a valuable experience of having to grow within a profession that they can clearly communicate to pharmacy schools that they're working with. So something that we did with her personal statement is absolutely take the time to talk about how she grew as a professional, how she learned how to manage responsibility, and how she learned how to manage the fact that like sometimes you're the only person on shift and there's a line of people at the counter. Those of you that are techs know what that feeling is like. So we really like to give students the opportunity to highlight anything that they are proud of in a really direct and clear way while still maintaining the goal of keeping this concise and keeping it focused and on topic, which again, I hope the 5 paragraph essay helps you to do. And then the last thing I just want to circle back to is avoid oversharing. I think undergraduate applications have sort of created this interesting thing where students are sort of interested in maybe highlighting some of their most difficult experiences or their most traumatic experiences within this kind of a setting because they feel like they need to establish some kind of like depth of reason as to why they should have this opportunity outside of their own personal accomplishments. And if you have a great life story, of course, we want to know about it and you're welcome to share it. There is also, however, the special life circumstances section of PharmCAS where you can do that. You really want to be careful in terms of like taking an essay that could have been a really clear and focused essay on the things that you've achieved throughout your life and turning it into a biography of everything negative that's ever happened to you. It's just not going to look super strong on paper. And all of you are clearly wonderful and will have the opportunity to be pharmacists if you want to be. So instead of focusing on that kind of a thing, focus on why you deserve it because you do deserve it. And at a bottom line level, you want to make sure your essay clearly communicates why you deserve it. And I hope that this session helps you in terms of framing with that. But I wanted to leave time if there were any questions or things that I could help students with. Of course, as was mentioned, I will be in my booth from 5 to 7 p.m. tonight as well, and I'm happy to take any questions that students might have then, but I do have some time now as well.
We haven't gotten any in the chat so far or in the Q&A feature. So, oh, I we just got one actually. Do you have any advice for students who struggled academically at the start of undergrad and how to talk about that in their application?
That is an excellent question. And that's a question that I get a lot. I actually think that there's really, really good opportunity for students who maybe, especially when they started college, struggled a little bit academically and had to overcome that, to really use that as a strength in their application, right? When I talk to my colleagues, the number one thing that they talk about is they want students with resiliency, right? That something didn't go right at some point, and a student had to overcome that. So let's say, classic example for our students is organic chemistry one. Maybe you felt the same way. You sat for Orgo 1 and it just did not go well. First time in your life you ever got a D or a C or whatever, and it really set you back a little bit. But then you retook it and you got an A or you got a B. That is an excellent story in how you've grown and overcome academically. And it's a great opportunity in a personal essay to share what that process was like. Did you meet with people? Did you rethink your study habits? If you rethought your study habits, what did that look like? Did you readdress like how you were allocating time throughout your day? If you did, what did that look like? Right? We want to see students who have the ability when life gets tough to really overcome that. And so I think that's a really great opportunity for a student who struggled academically to do so. And the last thing that I'll say too is that like at some point in pharmacy school, there is going to be a course that challenges you in a way that like you haven't been challenged academically before. So having like a clear history of being able to navigate those kinds of challenges is also really not just an asset for the personal statement, but an asset for you as a student pursuing pharmacy education.
If anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A feature. I'll give it a little bit more time. Well, hearing none, I'm going to thank Tyler for his session today and remind everybody that if you do have any other questions, you can. Oh, we actually just got one. Um, can a great personal essay with a clear path overcome GPA?
That's a really good question, right? So this is also a question that I get a lot is if maybe you don't have like the all-star perfect GPA, what is your trajectory into pharmacy school and how can your application still look strong on paper? A personal statement is absolutely a big part of that. Many schools engage in a process called holistic review, and maybe this is something you've heard before, but it's when universities don't just look at your GPA, but they kind of look at the overall person behind that GPA and come to some sort of combined evaluation on your status as it relates to their institution. A strong personal statement is absolutely part of that calculus, and I have seen that be a real benefit to students who maybe don't typically meet like what our GPA standard is here at UB, get into pharmacy school and not just get into pharmacy school, but have a review from a faculty member that says like this student needs to go to pharmacy school here. But I would say that I would also encourage a student in that situation to also really think about with the experiences section of the PharmCAS application to be really robust in items that you share in terms of like volunteer opportunities, opportunities that you have had to be in a pharmacy, job opportunities in general, right? TJ Maxx, whatever, to really clearly indicate other parts of your life. And the last thing I'll say about this, because it is a good question, is to also be aware of that special life circumstances section within the PharmCAS application. That is a really, really important section. And it gives you a chance to really just free write on how you are unique as an individual and maybe why you might have felt like an academic issue during your academics at any point.
We did get two more questions. Um, I don't think we're going to have time to address these though, so I would encourage you both to visit Tyler at his booth. Expo hours today are 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you again for your presentation. And also reminding everybody that recordings will be available after. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today and have a great rest of the virtual fair.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye bye.